So, what are the benefits of negative emotions? Find out today on this episode of IncreMental Health Tips. Welcome to IncreMental Health Tips. My name is Jared, and as always, I'm joined by my co host Liz. Today, we're going to be talking about the benefits of negative emotions. Now, for those of you who have been with us all year, we started up in January of 2021. Our first most successful piece of content was a really short video that talked about the benefits of negative thinking. And so along those lines, we wanted to follow up that really short video with maybe a broad, larger discussion of how negative emotions can actually be beneficial and why we shouldn't just avoid negative emotions, but rather understand their purpose and understand when they're being helpful and when they're not. So, Liz, how should we go about this? When are negative emotions actually helpful?
So, in part of my training, what we're taught to look for is disproportionate emotions. So, if someone has extremely strong emotional reactions, or if they have completely no emotional reaction, those are things we're supposed to pay attention to. And the concern is that if someone's having no emotional reaction, that it's an indicator that there's something wrong. They're disconnected from their emotions. And, this could be a sign of a number of problems like disassociation or something that the person has found their emotions too difficult to manage, and so they've completely disconnected from them.
Now, which is obviously on the more serious end of that scale. But I mean, in a certain aspect, I think we all can understand that we feel pain, and that the whole feeling of pain is helpful to us. If we lean against a hot stove, we feel the heat from that, we feel pain, and that is our body's way of saying, you're touching something hot, you need to stop that. And so then we pull away. We pull away our hand. So in the same way, although we don't like pain, we don't enjoy it, it serves a purpose. Now, pain is not good when it is not serving a purpose. Like if you are inflicting pain upon yourself that is not serving a functional purpose in your life, that's obviously bad. So when I think of this anyways, I think of negative emotions or negative thinking in a really similar way, to where they give us indicators of what's going on around us in the same way that our sense of pain might give us an indicator that something's going on around us.
Yeah, and I don't know that the emotions necessarily have to be beneficial to us, but if they're reflecting a typical response to something, like if a family member is sick or has just passed away, it is normal to be upset or angry or feel a deep sense of sadness. So those normal emotions, as much as we don't like when they're present, it is part of the grieving process. And if we don't acknowledge those emotions, then it makes it really difficult to work through our feelings and come to a sense of closure about the issue.
Well, and as well, I think part of the danger really of this is when we face negative emotions, there are avoidance behaviors that can actually be less healthy or more detrimental, if you will, to us than actually dealing with the problem that we're facing. Like an example that readily comes to mind is somebody who's very high anxiety. might have a lot of anxiety about if they're in school, about a presentation for school or public speaking or something like that. And the negative emotions and the fear and anxiety they're feeling about going through that may not be, as you say, proportional to, the actual stress of giving a presentation. So how do we make that determination? How do we know if our response is proportional? Like, what are some ways we can know? Or is this something that we are just always going to have to follow up with the therapist?
Well, it can be helpful to follow up with a therapist even if your emotions are within a typical range. So, something like grieving the end of a marriage or the death of a person, those can be transition periods where having a supportive person to talk to can really speed up the process of grieving and be a good support to the person while they're going through that. But I think especially if you notice that your emotions last for a long period of time. So if it's, grief, if you're heavily grieving after a month, then you might consider getting some support to help you through that and to make sure that you have the support there in order to process it and see steps forward. So if the emotions are really extreme, if you feel that you're no longer able to function, that's probably the best indicator that your emotions are preventing you from functioning in ways you were able to function before.
Well, as well, I think part of the way we can know is by testing. So if you have anxiety about a presentation, you can always, and I know this is something you've talked about before, you can always take note, write down your predictions on how you're going to feel after. And then after you do something, you can review your predictions and see if your predictions actually came true. And this can help you because emotions aren't necessarily good indicators of reality and they're not objective. And so that can actually help us know if maybe we're being irrational in our emotional response or beyond the point to what would be normal. Because obviously having some anxiety over something that's stressful like a presentation, sure, that's normal to be nervous. But I think making a prediction and testing it can also be a really good strategy to help people. Any other practical tips you would give people, Liz?
Yes. People can write in the comments any questions or observations they have about this, and we can respond back. They can also check out our playlist on managing emotions and see what help they're able to get from that. They can also Google tips on how to deal with whatever unpleasant emotional issues they're facing. Could be caused by stress or, like you mentioned, presentation anxiety. There's plenty of free resources available on topics like that. And they can also look into support groups that are available to people facing their issue. Support groups can often be a cheaper way of getting into therapy without having to be one-on-one with a therapist.
Well, as well, also, and you mentioned some of our resources, checking out Cognitive Distortions, or the book by Burns, Feeling Good. So sometimes understanding cognitive distortions or distorted thinking can really help you better understand the negative emotions you're thinking and challenge them and test if they are proportional or reasonable, as it were. But that's all the time we have for today. But if you enjoy our content, please share with your friends and family. Like and also subscribe. You can follow us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And we really appreciate the outpouring of support we've been getting. And, to each and every one of you who allowed this content to be possible. And until next time, remember that small steps can lead to big changes. We'll see you next time.